Have you received adequate training for your profession? Hello, my name is Will, and this is Exploding Helicopter, the podcast making critical decisions by flipping a coin. By the early 90s, an increasingly craggy Clint Eastwood was stuck in a rut making mundane genre pictures and Dirty Harry sequels. However, in 1993, Old Squint was able to revitalise his career Within the Line of Fire, a film about an ageing Secret Service agent embroiled in a plot to assassinate the president. So, a decade later, it's not hard to see what attracted another veteran Hollywood great to make the film we're reviewing here. Because in the mid-noughties, after a 3-year absence from acting, Michael Douglas was looking to relaunch himself on the big screen. And what better way to do it than play an aging Secret Service agent embroiled in a plot to assassinate the president? So on this show, we're reviewing The Sentinel. To help me review the film, I'm joined by a man who is the only person I know who'd take a bullet for me. It's returning champion Nick Rehack. Welcome back to the show, buddy.
Thank you for having me back, man. I appreciate it.
Well, I'm especially grateful to have you on this podcast because it is your birthday today.
It is. It really is.
And what finer way to celebrate that august date than to talk about The Sentinel?
I mean, when you share a birthday with someone like Michael Douglas, I feel like you have to do it.
Well, this was a fantastic bit of trivia, which you informed me of, was that I was completely unaware that, not only was today your birthday, but it is the birthday of the star of the film that we are reviewing today, one Michael Douglas.
Yeah, him, as well as his wife, Catherine Zeta-Jones.
It's like I planned this, but really it's all just freakish coincidence. So I hate to blow the illusion of slick professionalism, which I normally exude when I do this podcast. But by freakish coincidence, it is the birthday of everyone who is a major player in this particular podcast, yourself and Michael Douglas. I mean, yeah, the odds on that are really quite phenomenal.
Yeah, as Kiefer Sutherland's dad might say, the odds ever be in my favor, huh?
Well, I mean, we're talking about Michael Douglas here, and I wanted to check in with you about your familiarity with the great man. I mean, hopefully, I don't need to explain to you what a huge star he was in the 80s and 90s. I mean, he starred in some massive commercial hits and films that are cultural touchstones for that period as well. So, whether you like it or not, he is an important actor. But, how important is Michael Douglas to you, Nick?
He's present, and I know of his work, not just, the work he's done in the new Ant-Man films or Behind the Candelabra. I'm talking like his better work, stuff like The Game, stuff like The American President, Wall Street, what's the other one? Falling Down. Films like that I'm familiar with and I've watched, but other films, I think, what was it, like Romancing the Stone and Jewel of the Nile, roles like that and other films like that I haven't seen. I've kind of seen more of his hard-edged, dramatic, like kind of award-worthy-ish, or at least you get a lot of attention for it type performances. Stuff where he's got like smaller roles or kind of pops in, I haven't seen a whole lot of.
Well, it sounds like there's quite a few big titles in his CV that you have yet to see. Because from the sounds of it, you haven't seen Fatal Attraction or Basic Instinct?
No, I have seen neither of those.
No, I mean, they are touchstone films, I think, for the erotic thriller genre, but also in terms of, I know Basic Instinct, I think that was 1990, but if you're thinking about like 80s cinema, like you definitely need to have seen Fatal Attraction at the very least. So you got a couple of big titles there that you need to see. You mentioned Romancing the Stone and Jewel in the Nile, and that was Michael Douglas doing Indiana Jones. And do you know what's particularly interesting about Jewel of the Nile, Nick?
I do not. Please tell me.
It has an exploding helicopter in.
Well, now I have to watch it.
Exactly, and I think that you may be pointing towards a future destination for your viewing and our podcasting. I think
That's good enough for me. It would be two birds, one stone kind of thing, because I'd also have to watch Romancing the Stone because I'm not familiar with that character. So,
oh yeah, I think if we're gonna review Jewel and the Nile, I think you need to watch Romancing the Stone. I think for the full experience. So we'll see how you go with this Michael Douglas film before I put you through the paces with Jewel in the Nile. But let's not mess around. Let's get stuck into the Sentinel. So let's see if Trailer Man can tell us anything about the history of the Secret Service.
In the 141-year history of the United States Secret Service,
You made time. Ooh, I look good.
there's never been a traitor until now.
There's an agent who wants to help assassinate the president.
We need to find this guy.
We put Breckenridge in charge of the whole thing. He's kind of a protege of yours. What do you think?
He'll follow the evidence wherever it leads him.
I don't believe this. You're being investigated for treason.
Excuse me? Why would I want to kill the president?
I am following the evidence.
I'm the guy that initiated this investigation. I am being framed.
Garrison has escaped from the rear of the residence.
A lot of people are looking for you.
I'm innocent. Damn it.
At gut level, it doesn't make sense. The only thing this guy cares about in life is his job.
For most of you, he's a friend. For some of you, he's a legend. Hell, he taught me everything I know. He is smarter and more experienced than all of you. He knows how you think, he knows how you operate, and he will use that against you.
They think you're an assassin.
Go! Go!
They will kill you.
You still gotta find the mole.
What's the least contained environment the president's going to be in over the next few days?
Who sent you? The traitor is still out there, Dave.
You really think it's him, don't you?
Holster your weapon!
My radio just went dead.
It's going down! Get down!
Michael Douglas is a veteran Secret Service agent who once took a bullet during an assassination attempt on Ronald Reagan. 25 years later, he's still loyally protecting POTUS, although less faithfully he's conducting a clandestine affair with the president's wife. Just in case Douglas's life wasn't complicated enough, one of his colleagues is murdered just after he learns that there's a mole within the presidential protection team and that there's a plot to kill the prez. As this is a conspiracy thriller, Mikey quickly finds himself framed as the murderer and the mole, so naturally, after that, he goes on the run to clear his name and stop the presidential assassination. In the cast, the main roles are taken by Michael Douglas, Kim Basinger, Kiefer Sutherland, and Eva Longoria. Among the supporting players, we have some very familiar faces, including Martin Donovan, Paul Calderon, and Sledgehammer himself, David Rash. The film was directed by Clark Johnson, who was Detective Meldrick Lewis in the excellent TV series Homicide: Life on the Street. But alongside his acting career, he's also clocked up an extensive resume of directing credits, mostly in television, but he did direct the 2003 big screen reboot of SWAT, which listeners will know also featured an exploding helicopter. The screenplay for this was by George Nolfi, who wrote scripts for The Bourne Ultimatum, The Adjustment Bureau, and Ocean's 12. The screenplay was based on a book by Gerald Pitivich, who was a Secret Service agent himself before he turned to writing. And he also wrote the books that To Live and Die in LA and the Wesley Snipes, Disney Hopper film Boiling Point are based on. The Sentinel came out in 2006 and has a 6.1 user rating on IMDb and a 2.7 out of 5 rating on Letterboxd. It grossed $78 million worldwide off a $60 million budget, so would have been considered a bit of a flop. The critical consensus for this was that it was a well-made but hackneyed thriller. But with all of that out of the way, Nick, what did you make of The Sentinel?
I was kind of bored by it. I mean, it's an intriguing premise, and I think it's better explored with a much stronger script, but it didn't do anything for me. I felt like there was no point in having Eva Longoria in there. Yeah, that was just completely waste.
I mean, she
like
looked
a waste.
nice.
Absolutely, but there was nothing for her to do other than to like yes and like, okay, how do we get to the next scene? We're gonna call Jill. All right.
Well,
That's it.
She does get to sort of have to deal with lots of sexual harassment. I mean, that's the only thing that she gets to do in this film is basically be leched over by lots of men.
Yeah, which at times is kind of creepy, but at the same time, I'm like, yeah, I get it. You're in that kind of world and how it's dominated, and it's. I guess it wouldn't be realistic if you didn't have that kind of stuff in there. But even like Michael Douglas and Kiefer Sutherland, I feel like their characters and their portrayals, they're just immediately at 100 as soon as you start talking to them. Michael Douglas is so intense. Kiefer Sutherland is angry about everything. Like everything just felt so out of place. Like none of the pieces worked. I feel like if you change up the cast, it might be a little bit better. If you, I don't know, dial it up. It looked at times a little cheap, almost like a TV movie, and I was really thrown off by that. I don't know. I think because I was so just bored with the movie, I started kind of picking apart other things. Like, I don't know what else to say. You should be on the edge of your seat, thrilled, like a Manchurian Candidate from the 60s starring Frank Sinatra. That's how tense of a thriller this should be. There should be real stakes and you should be involved and concerned. But as I'm watching this, I just don't care. And, and maybe it's just me, but it just doesn't, it's not grabbing me.
Well,
It's
I think you make some very fair points about this film, and I think the most obvious comparator to it is the film that I mentioned in the intro for the podcast, which is the Clint Eastwood film In the Line of Fire. And have you seen that one, Nick?
I might have. I'm not 100% sure.
Okay, well, let me refresh your memory by just saying that it is a great film. It is everything that The Sentinel isn't. You have, real tension. You've got a compelling villain. You've got a hero with a kind of interesting backstory that plays into the kind of major plot of the film. So it is a much better example of the kind of elderly Secret Service agent trying to stop an assassination. But I probably should apologise for putting you through this film, Nick. I mean, I'm very busy at work at the moment. The last thing I needed in my life was to do some sort of complicated film for this podcast where I had to do lots of research, talk about, in-depth themes. I just wanted something nice and simple, straightforward that I could just watch and chat about. And so I kind of plumped for The Sentinel. But
well, you nailed it. I mean, there are some interesting qualities about the film. So it's not like I'm sitting here like, oh, this was, horrible. Because I've also seen way worse films and talked about them on this program.
Well, I actually think this is... I know you've been... I actually would argue that this is actually a very watchable film. I mean, it's very vanilla, but there is... you've got high-profile actors. It is well directed. It kind of moves along. I think it could be a bit tighter, but it moves along at a fairly decent clip. I do think there are major issues with this film, though. I would liken it to a House of Cards, because whilst it is watchable, as soon as you touch it at all, the whole thing just collapses. And I think you alluded to, some of the problem, there's no tension here. And, what are the stakes? And I put this down to, I'd pose a few questions to you, because we have, Michael Douglas trying to stop this conspiracy to kill the president. But, I'll ask you this question, Nick. Who are the people that want the president dead, and why do they want him dead? Are you actually able to answer that question?
It's the Russians, and it's because it's America.
Well, I mean, I'm probably going to have got that slightly wrong. It's the invented country of Kyrgyzstan, whoever they are. But we don't know why they want him dead. We don't know. The film, there's some sort of very, very vague allusion to a pipeline, but there's no scene in the film where David Rash as the president sort of says, we got to shut that pipeline down, or we can't let it be built, or or anything that might allude to some sort of reason that the president of Kyrgyzstan wants the American president dead. There's no, we also have this character. Major spoilers. We always talk spoilers here, so you should be. Anyone listening to this podcast should be familiar with our MO here. But if you, just in case you haven't watched this film and you are intent on watching it, gonna get into like the mole in the Secret Service. We never find out what his motivation is for betraying the Secret Service. There's some sort of mention that the KGB, inverted commas, bought him 20 years earlier, but why did he sell out? Like, did they have some blackmail on him, or was he hacked off with America and decided to sell himself out for the money? We never find out that reason, and it just is every sort of major question that if you've got a film about some people who are trying to bump off the American president, and there's somebody who's betraying the American president. I'm afraid so. If you're going to make a film like that, there needs to be some reason why they want the president dead, and there needs to be some reason why somebody betraying the American president is betraying them. Like, however limp or lame that is. But we don't get any answers to either of those questions in this film.
We sure don't, and it hurts because if they took out a couple scenes where they're just lingering on things, and they replaced it with some dialogue, or even a couple like one-off liners, or you walk past and you see a newsreel that kind of touches on something, little hints here and there to kind of build that world, then I think you have something. And then it also causes you to think too, because you could be like, oh, if I were in their shoes, would I have done the same thing? Would I have defected to the KGB and sold secrets? And then that makes for a more intriguing film, or at least something that you can have, those deeper moral conversations about. One thing I did, though, is if you kind of listen towards the end of the speech that he gives at the G8, he talks about a unified African economy. And that's almost verbatim. And he says, we have to make the African economic union a reality. That's what he says. Yes. So I was kind of close. But so I'm assuming that, many African nations are getting oil from this country at a bad rate, or they discover their own oil and they want to start using theirs, or they're going to cut that country off. So I'm assuming it has to deal with something like that. But even then, like, kind of piecing together little morsels along the way, if it doesn't spell out the whole answer, then I kind of don't care about it. Well, there's a lot of things that this film does and then just doesn't do it again, and doesn't talk about it or make mention. And it's interesting things that I think would carry on and kind of help the film a little bit.
I totally agree. We have to know why somebody wants the American president dead. I mean, that if you're making a film about an assassination thriller, then that's the very least that you've got to kind of clearly establish in the film. And I think the other thing this film desperately needs is a ticking clock. So it all climaxes at that conference you were talking about, and so it sort of needs to be. It's really simple. It's just like, okay, we need to kill him before he gives this speech at the conference. Like, so there's a sort of, there's a race. You have that race against time element here, but the film doesn't bother to set that one up. So it just sort of rather ambles along. Like, it doesn't really feel like it's too big of a deal that anybody wants the American president dead.
No, and it's a very long hour and 48 minutes. You kind of touched on it earlier in that it could use some tightening up. I don't know what exactly you would trim, but just something to kind of tighten up and give it that feel. Like you said, it's missing that clock too, which would kind of help drive that pace. Even if it adds a random line of finding out and going, oh no, they're going to do this and this, then, oh my, that's in 12 hours. Okay, cool. Now we have more of an idea. But like you said, they're just kind of ambling along.
Now, this is a film all about the Secret Service here, trying to protect the president. I don't think I've ever seen a film about the Secret Service, or where, there is some sort of official law enforcement involved, where there's quite so much rank incompetency. So, I mean, we get to see all sorts of, egregious breaches of security. So, kind of like Michael Douglas, manages to sneak into that restaurant to have a surreptitious conversation with Kim Basinger when he's meant to be on the run. He escapes from the clutches of the Secret Service from his own home. He gets into that conference at the end of the film where he's meant to be like a wanted man by all these law enforcement agencies, and he's able to get through the security perimeter without being shot. It just is. I found the portrayal of the sort of Secret Service here utterly preposterous, utterly baffling, so dumb. I think that's the word I'm looking for.
Yeah, and it's perfectly summed up in a scene where, when he escapes from his home, he's able to get a gun and a radio, and Kiefer Sutherland says, "He got your gun and your radio," and the character looks over at Jill, Eva Longoria's character, and Kiefer snaps back at him. He's like, "Don't look at her. She just started. How long have you been here?" And it's like, yeah, how long have you been here? Because you are much younger than Michael Douglas. Michael Douglas should not be able to pull these moves on you. Michael Douglas should all of a sudden, ooh, my shoulder, something that slows him down, and then you take him out. It's how he kind of gets away with it. I don't understand. And like you said, the incompetency level is incredibly high, and it would never be that high for an organization like this.
Well, there is one scene. Going back to, I mentioned it already, is that scene where Kim Basinger is out for dinner in a restaurant with some of her friends. Now, that scene takes place after the president and all of the sort of his security apparatus have been told, and they know, because there's the evidence, there's a mole within the Secret Service. And it also happens after Marine 1 has been shot down by an RPG. So there's been there's been not just we've got a mole, there's also been an attempt to kill the president. And Kim Basinger goes out for dinner that evening at a restaurant, with members of the public present. It's just inconceivable. The entire White House would be on absolute lockdown at a moment like that, and she's going out for dinner in a public restaurant. It's just bonkers.
And it's post 9/11. We're 5 years removed. It would be that much more intense. You mean to tell me if you're going to watch the First Lady go down a small hallway into a bathroom door and look away, hear the door close, and look back, and be kind of, now I'm sure it's fine. We got one of those moments. Her security literally goes, I'm sure it's fine. Not a walk back to check. Nothing.
We've ragged on the film a little bit, but there were some elements of this film that I did enjoy. And during the film, before Michael Douglas has to clear his name, so he kind of goes on the run in order to try and clear his name and find out the real perpetrators of the assassination. And I did actually enjoy that part of the film where, Michael Douglas is sneaking, he's kind of engaged in a bit of cat and mouse with the people who are pursuing them. He's also then coming up with some sneaky tricks to try and get information out of people to lead him a step closer to the people who are behind the conspiracy. So I kind of enjoyed that, I guess, that MacGyver-ish element where Michael Douglas is relying on his wits in order to kind of stay ahead of his pursuers, but also get a step closer to the people he's trying to catch.
I did appreciate that, because even though there's two concepts that immediately came to mind when he's at the gas station and he's printing out a bunch of Publishers Clearinghouse to kind of make him look like that guy, goes to the door, asks for the person, and then immediately runs over this little box with gear and is able to track and trace a phone call. We've seen both of that done before in different ways, but putting them together like this with a slight twist of him being on the run kind of makes it fresh. And it makes it a little more exciting and kind of accessible and enjoyable, unlike some other things that kind of feel just pulled right from other films. Like earlier on when he was meeting with Walter and he's walking around kind of in broad daylight, and they're discussing about, you got a lead, you got a mole in your organization, follow the money, so on and so forth. Like, it's in broad daylight and no one's around. But in any other film, they would kind of be sitting on a bench, or they would make sure no one is around. And here they are with a lot of people around. And sure, there's a monument or two in the distance, but there's some things that when they nail it, and it looks good and fresh. And other things they just kind of seemingly don't put as much care into.
Well, let's talk about a couple of the actors who are in this film. And obviously, Michael Douglas is the star of this particular film. He had been away from acting for 3 years at the point of making this. He had got into a relationship with Catherine Zeta-Jones. They'd got married. I can't remember when they'd had kids whether they'd had kids at this point. But he'd stepped away from making films and he hadn't starred in anything, not even TV, for 3 years. So this was his big return to the screen. This is such a strange film to try and make a comeback with. I don't know. I mean, I think I'm a bit more familiar with Michael Douglas's kind of career and CV than you are. But this just seems such a strange film for him to make a comeback with. I mean, not just because it's such a vanilla film, but also it's just rather out of the Michael Douglas wheelhouse. I mean, he's not somebody who, he was 62 when he made this, so he was frankly too old for the role that he's playing at all in this. But he'd never really been somebody who we saw a lot of running around with a gun. A very strange film for him to decide to this is how I want to announce myself back as a big screen actor.
Yeah, it is a little out of sorts. And when we think of him running around with a gun, we tend to think of Falling Down. But that film is of its time, and not only that, it's a character study, and it's a great character study. And you have something like this where he's just kind of there. He's like, yeah, this is a role, this is a movie I'm doing, and it just kind of goes along. I feel like anytime he's in a film, for the most part, he kind of owns the moment. When he's on screen, you're paying attention to him. It is a Michael Douglas film. It is his movie, no matter how big a role or how small a role. But all of a sudden, this film does not feel that way. This film just kind of feels like he quick popped in because somebody dropped out and did it because he was available and it was shooting close, and then he went home. I'm not saying he phoned it in, but I feel like it's just kind of like a stock level performance. Like, it's just enough to, raise your voice when you need it and kiss someone passionately when you need it. But outside of that, he's there.
The other person that I wanted to discuss with you was Kiefer Sutherland, who is one of Michael Douglas's antagonists, I guess, in this film. And as I was watching this, him and Douglas have got some beef, so that means that there's plenty of scenes of them, shouting at each other or kind of having some very barbed exchanges with and even if they're not shouting, Kiefer Sutherland is it's kind of like hoarsely whispering in that patented way that only he seems to be able to do. Watching him in this film, it just sort of reminded me. I mean, I can't think of a single film where Kiefer Sutherland has played a character who is wholly likable. I mean, he always seems to play, either they are overtly nasty characters or they're always characters with an edge about them. I mean, I can't. Yeah, has he ever been wholly likable in anything?
I have two that immediately come to mind.
Okay. I'm intrigued.
One of them, because I just watched it last week. I was rewatching Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me.
Okay.
And he plays a kind of green behind the gills, fresh detective that's been kind of thrown into this murder mystery. So he doesn't have a lot of lines, and he's got a pretty good screen presence, but I liked him in that for the time that he was on screen. He's a pretty nice guy. And then his character from The Three Musketeers back in 1993, he played Athos. Okay. I really liked his character. He does have a bit of an edge, and he's a bit of a jerk at times, But overall, I liked his character in that, and he had like this, badass head of hair, big beard going on. I was like, look at this guy, like this is what's up.
Well, it's good to know that. Okay, it's good to know that there are at least a couple of films where, he you can warm to him a little bit. But there was something else I also wanted to talk to you about. Kiefer Sutherland, because we are both big music fans, and I'm always interested in the musical careers of actors, even if their musical careers aren't that interesting. So I couldn't pass up the opportunity here to investigate Kiefer Sutherland's musical career. I mean, I say I couldn't pass up the opportunity. I did rather pass up the opportunity because in terms of my research, I listened to one solitary song by him. I mean, Kiefer Sutherland has recorded 3 albums of country rock. I think that would probably be the best way to describe it. But I think, Nick, your investigations were much more thorough than mine. So I mean, what did you make of Kiefer's musical oeuvre?
Well, I listened to 2 full studio albums.
Oh my! I don't deserve you, Nick. I really don't.
And not great. Not great. I shouldn't say it like that. It's not for me. I would say it's new country that you would hear more nowadays, but it also feels old at the same time in that the lyrical compositions are kind of basic, very easy sing-songy rhymes, and there's nothing really digging in there. It felt like everything he's singing is just kind of like an act. Like, oh, they want me to sing about something like this. Nothing felt like it had heart. There was nothing, no songs of like, I've been to the top of the mountain and, it's lonely up here, or, I'm always away from home, I miss my family. Just songs or feelings that people can connect to. His voice is fine. It's very, I feel, auto-tuney. Like, it just doesn't sound as genuine. The live songs that I listen to, he's pretty good live. Okay. I would take him live any day of the week, and they tend to go a little heavier on the guitar, so it's more like bluesy, even though it's not. But just lyrically and structurally, it just sounds like very generic mid-2000s country music, even though the albums were released like 3-4 years ago.
Well, I was really interested by what you were saying about his voice, because on the extensive musical research that I did, the one song that I listened to, I mean, his voice sounded... He hasn't got a bad singing voice, but I certainly wouldn't describe it as good. There's kind of an interesting rasp to it, but it also sounded a little bit flat to me, and... I'm interested in what you were saying about the live nature, because it definitely sounded a bit, when I was listening to him singing, it did sound definitely a bit lifeless. There didn't seem like any great urgent need to communicate anything through the song. So yeah, what am I missing perhaps on the live performance? Does he sort of, do you get that kind of like, I don't know, that a bit more of the authentic man himself or something coming through?
No, that's exactly it. It just feels like there's life in his voice. Whereas on the albums, it's just like, okay, this could have been like an AI thing where it's like, hey, we put Kiefer Sutherland and, Merle Haggard in an AI thing, mix it up, and here's what came out. But when he's live, there's like there's a purpose behind it, and it feels good to hear it. And it's not one of those like, yeah, I'm just dicking around. It's more of like, no, I believe in what I'm singing, even though it's not as strong as it could be. I think if he sung stuff that was a little more relatable, or just like character songs, like or story songs, something to like bring you in, I think it'd be worth the time. But as it stands, if I don't hear it again, I'm okay.
Okay, so what if you were going to be stuck on a desert island, Nick, and you could only take a DVD copy of the Sentinel with you, or like one of Kiefer Sutherland's albums with you as your only sort of, cultural entertainment, what would you take?
Wow. I mean, I guess I'm going to take the Kiefer Sutherland. album, I think I would take the special edition of his album Down in a Hole. It's the first album he put out, but that's also one that has some some live tracks on it. I think I would do that.
Well, there you go. There's the final word on the Sentinel. Go and listen. Our final word is go and listen to Kiefer Sutherland's music.
And actually, you know what? Skip the album Down in a Hole. Just do Reckless in Me. I feel like Reckless in Me is a little bit stronger.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to be looking at the exploding helicopter action.
Ambition.
You are one hell of a lawyer. You're hungry for success, you work hard.
Passion.
I think you should spend the night with me.
Betrayal.
Well, I love you. I don't want to hurt you.
Well, then just let me go.
Can I just be the loud?
Sometimes your only defense
Guilty or not guilty?
is murder.
The guy died in a boating accident.
Get away from me. Get away.
Where were you the night of the murder?
Why are you talking to me like this? What are you doing?
He's got blood pouring down his face. It's in his eyes.
What, do you want to hurt me? Do you want to murder me too? Is that it?
You son of a kid, I'm gonna hurt you. I'll kill you.
Please open the door.
Don't let her in. No, don't let her in.
Jennifer Grey, Peter Berg, A Case for Murder.
We're back, and now we're looking at the exploding helicopter action. So, what happens? El Presidente flies to Camp David to press the flesh with some foreign dignitaries, arriving stylishly in the presidential chopper, a huge VH 3D Sea King, which is excitingly named Marine One. As it leaves Camp David, we see a panoramic shot of the helicopter in the distance. Then, without any warning or preamble, a missile snakes up from the tree line and hits it. It appears to explode in slow motion and break into two. We don't see anything but the briefest of close-ups, and the whole thing is over in a flash. So, Nick, what did you make of the exploding helicopter action?
I liked aspects of it, and I also disliked aspects of it. I liked that the attack seemingly came out of nowhere, and I really liked the fact that they just kind of hung there with it. Usually, you get an explosion, you get like 5 or 6 cuts, rapid quick, to show different angles of it, and then they just go back to it, or back to the film at hand. But with this, they kind of linger, maybe a little too long, but they just kind of linger there after it explodes, and you just watch the debris fall down out of the sky. And I just thought that was kind of neat because we really don't see that a whole lot. The effects work, not the best, probably, of its time for 2006 when this came out. But overall, I liked it because of just how different it was. Even though it seemingly didn't look different, for us, it's different.
Nick, I totally agree. I think that, that shot after the, it's quite low key, but it's actually quite low key in a way that kind of really ends up sort of drawing you in and absorbing you, because you get this very sort of like long shot, and it's actually quite beautiful. Sort of the missile snakes up from the ground, hits the helicopter, it breaks in two, and there's no great sort of like overpowering explosion sound effect. It's actually very quiet, and you just see as you say, there's no cuts to close-ups of wreckage. You just see all this unfold in one long continuous long shot, and it's actually quite beautiful. And I agree, it's not something, the way in which it's shot, it's not something you see very often. There is another film where you get this sort of style of exploding helicopter done, the John le Carré adaptation, Our Kind of Traitor, which came out sometime in the 2010s. That has a very similar exploding helicopter in it as well, which again I think has that same sort of, it's almost like, I'm gonna be very highfalutin here, it's almost like a work of art, Nick.
Yeah, like, and this is gonna sound silly, like a moving painting.
Yes, Yes.
In the weirdest of ways. Like, this could be a background where it goes away, and then we're left with the sky, and then just here it comes again, and it blows up. Like, every minute. That's how you know it's been a minute, because the helicopter explodes again, like a visual clock or something. But it is nice to look at, and it's just kind of good on them for hanging in there with it and not just cutting away, and and that's what this film does. The film does really intriguing and fun things, but it doesn't do them enough to make everything else worth it.
Well, there were a couple of other notable elements to this film, because I know, Nick, it's becoming a bit of a running theme with us, is the appearances of presidents in films with exploding helicopters. Because did you at the start of this film, we get to see some stock footage of the presidential, the assassination attempt on Ronald Reagan. And,
by John Hinckley Jr.
Yeah, and obviously recently we've been talking about the appearances of some other American presidents in films that we've been reviewing. So we got to see George Bush, the original, in Under Siege. We also
it was Carter or Ford in Black Sunday.
Yes, and we got to see W in one of the other. I can't remember what film was that we saw him in. I can't remember which. But we're getting through the. We have to do Nixon next, I think.
Is there an exploding helicopter in that film?
I'm not thinking of the film. I'm thinking of the president. I'm thinking we need to find a film with an exploding helicopter that features. Hey, Nick, I've got it already. We've reviewed it already on the podcast. Black Dynamite has Richard Nixon in. It's somebody impersonating Richard Nixon, but that, frankly, as far as I'm concerned, that counts.
Man, what do you know? Look at what are the odds of this? It just keeps happening.
And it keeps happening. Literally, there's barely a film that we've talked about recently that doesn't have a real life American president in. So very very strange. But I did also, worthy of mention, is that we get to see a very famous helicopter blow up in this film. We get to see Marine One, the presidential chopper, explode here. But as I'm sure the good listeners of this podcast already know, Marine One has exploded in many other films before, but can you name any of them, Nick? That's what I'm asking. I'm going to put you on the spot here.
White House Down, I'm sure, has Marine One exploding at some point.
Sadly, it does have exploding helicopters, but not Marine One.
Interesting. How about Olympus Has Fallen?
Oh, yeah, I'm liking the way you're thinking, but Marine One doesn't explode in Olympus Has Fallen, but it does explode in Angel Has Fallen, the sequel to it.
Of course, the one I haven't named.
There's a couple of like sci-fi channel disaster movies which feature Marine One exploding. So Independence Disaster. That features Marine One exploding, and also Alien Siege. Independence Day, the inspiration for Independence Disaster. Independence Day, I don't know whether... that does have exploding helicopters in, but I don't know if we can really say that Marine One explodes in that film, because in a controversial scene, we see the White House explode, and we see Marine One, which is just taking off from the lawn of the White House. At the same time, it gets consumed by the explosion from the White House. But, so you would think, oh yeah, that must have exploded. But the First Lady, who is on board Marine One, survives this conflagration. So I'm not sure that we can really say, if that helicopter exploded, there's no way she would have survived. So I don't actually include Marine. I don't believe Independence Day includes amongst its exploding helicopters the destruction of Marine One, but others may have their own others may have their own opinion on that particular matter. But we can say the Sentinel is one of a small group of films that feature the destruction of the presidential helicopter.
Very nice, very nice, and more to come, I hope. That sounded weird. You know what I'm getting at. I'm not.
Well, I hope the Secret Service aren't listening to this podcast, because they're going to start hacking into your emails. They're going to start putting you under surveillance. Because you're clearly a threat to the office of the president. But before you get yourself into any more trouble, I think we should probably wrap this show up. So, Nick, thanks for joining me once again. Is there anything you've got going on at the moment that you want to plug?
I do, yes. I'm on a new podcast. It's called Play MST for me. It's a play on, Play MST for me. Jason Soto is a huge fan of Mystery Science Theater 3000, and I have never seen a single episode. And rather than say, hey, here's my favorite episodes, enjoy, instead we're watching every single episode of the show from the beginning and talking about each one of them. It's a fun journey so far. And I'm in it for the ride, and you can be in for it too. It's called Play MST for me. You can find it on Spotify, so on and so forth.
So this is people talking about films where people are talking about films.
Yes.
Okay. This is where the human race is at this moment in time.
It's real heady stuff, Will. Real heady stuff.
Yeah, I mean it's like Inception levels of kind of mind play there. But as always, don't forget to check out the Exploding Helicopter website at explodinghelicopter.com for more information and reviews of films where helicopters explode. If you could spread the word about what we're doing wherever you can, however you can, we'd be very grateful. We'll be back soon, but until then, what should people do, Nick?
You know what? I wrote it down weeks ago. And I should have been ready for it, and I should have known.
I tell you what,
and I don't. I'm trying to find that document right now. I don't think I have it.
I'll whisper it. Keep watching the skies for those exploding helicopters.
Keep watching those skies for those exploding helicopters.
Superb stuff.
This podcast is a proud member of the Lamb Podcasting Network. Find the network at largeassmovieblogs.com.